All right, all right. Good evening and good night, and welcome to the It's Your Perspective Talk Show podcast. It is Thursday, June 26, 2025. It's about 8:06 AST in the evening here. Welcome to the podcast tonight. We're coming to you live from St. Croix, Virgin Islands. What else I want to say here? We're on the road. Most importantly, I cannot forget this. We are on the road to 500 shows. Tonight, we have a guest in the studio. This episode tonight is 497. So we're getting close. Bingy Soup and I are super excited. We work hard. Met a lot of people. A lot of people love what we're doing. Shout out to everybody here, there, and everywhere. We're bringing this podcast to you live via StreamYard. And StreamYard links us into Facebook and YouTube. On Facebook, it's go to Live from the Virgin Islands. That's my professional page. Live from the Virgin Islands. Go on that page, you see the show tonight. It's also going on YouTube. It's our channel. It's called just It's Your Perspective Talk Show Podcast. Go on that. You'll see all our shows from the very first day to present right here. We're live in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, man. We love this place. What else we got? Be sure to subscribe on Facebook and YouTube. Like, comment, and share the post as well. We don't have any music artists tonight, so there's no disclaimer as far as the music goes. But more importantly, I'd like to say our prayers and his blessings, when you put it all together, you have one perfect love. So on that note, as we roll on here, I'd just like to introduce our guest tonight. There he is right there. Welcome to the world, Adam Paaske. Help me here, Adam. Is that Adam Paaske? That is Paaske. How do you pronounce that?
So actually, it's Paaske. So you say, oh, yes. So it gets when you put two A's together, it gets the sound of the last letter in the Danish alphabet, which is O, and it's that sound. So it's Adam Paaske. But listen, I like the way you pronounce it too. I'm very liberal when it comes to my name, and it means Easter. So in that sense, you could say that I have a very Jewish name, Adam.
Okay.
Adam Easter.
Okay, man. Sounds good to me, man. And so you are here in the Virgin Islands, St. Croix specifically, working on a documentary. But before we get into all that, I happened to meet you at my job some weeks back, and our friend Johanna Bermudez-Ruiz was there with you, and I just did a podcast with her maybe just the week before or something. But you were with her, and I met you, and so we talked, and you're just a perfect guest for the show. So here you are.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, just like that, you're here, man. So you're working on a documentary about the Virgin Islands and the Virgin Islands tourism and Denmark and the inner workings of how all that is. From your perspective, you're actually videotaping, you're doing video, you're talking to people, local people, just getting their perspective. So let's talk a little bit about this. So this is your first time here?
This is my second time on St. Croix.
Okay. So what your first time, when was that?
So I landed for the first time in my life on St. Croix the 2nd of February, 2023. So it's a bit more than 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I landed with a group of Danish tourists whom I followed for 2 weeks. We had started in Copenhagen, and what many Virgin Islanders have been surprised to know is that it's not very uncommon for Danish tourists to go in a large group. This group was, for instance, 21 individuals and a tour guide who go all the way with them from Copenhagen throughout the 3 main US Virgin Islands and all the way back. So I followed that group the entire time, and the first place we landed was on St. Croix, after, of course, having been to landed in Miami, London, Miami, and then and then St. Croix. And what happened was that the first thing that happened was that I was squeezed into a cab with these tourists, and I asked the driver if it would be okay for me to film in his cab, and he said that was totally fine. And his name was Joseph. And I was lucky to not wait 5 seconds longer before I turned on the camera. I was just on time when I put on the camera and he started to speak. And as I usually put it, I was sure that I had met the reincarnation of James Baldwin. He spoke so eloquently with such passion and such an enormous understanding of the history of St. Croix.
But let me ask you that. So you came with a specific task to videotape this whole encounter?
Exactly. No, the encounter, I had no clue. But the only thing I knew was that I was gonna do observational cinematic recordings with the Danish tourists, simply following them. And then what happened by chance was that the first thing that happened to me was that I was put in a cab with a man of enormous talents and enormous strong presence. And I thought to myself, I would like to follow these guys, but I really also want to follow this guy. So I promised myself that I would return another time, because I knew that this group, whom I had worked very hard to get access to, I think you can imagine that maybe if you have saved up a lot of money to go on a vacation, maybe you've saved up for months, maybe even years, and then a guy asks you, can I film you throughout your vacation, basically all the time except for when you go to the bathroom? maybe it's not the most attractive proposal ever. So I knew that the fact that I had got the access to actually follow and film large parts of these individuals' vacations was something that I'm not sure that I will get that access again. So I knew that I was going to concentrate entirely on this specific group, also because I could not know if this group would return. I knew that this group would never return. Maybe some individuals would return in another context. I could not know. But this group was a unique constellation of people, and I better film. So I filmed. I lost 8 kilos during those 2 weeks because I did not. It had got more to do with sports than arts. There was no doubt about it. I filmed a lot of time running around, changing batteries, and it was a lot of fun. And I knew, and therefore, because of my very limited amount of time that I had, I basically had no surplus energy. I knew that I was only going to be able to do short filmed conversations with Virgin Island tourist workers, and therefore I knew that I had to return another time, because of course their perspectives on Danish tourism is important.
Yes. So you're with this group, and you come here, and your purpose is to you're starting the documentary. And what is this documentary about more specifically? I mean, what are you trying to put together here?
I'm trying to as I work on it, maybe it will change because of course it's not done yet. So it's in the making, and but I envision that the film will be mainly structured around a group tour with Danish tourists. I don't know again if I will get access to another tour, so maybe it will be only based on the tour I've already been on, but at least you will follow in my film a group of Danish tourists that go to the US Virgin Islands on a 2-week vacation. That's almost always what the length of the vacation that Danes use here. Okay. And they will go to all 3 islands, main islands, and then I envision that you will also have some film conversations with the tourists after they have returned, where I already did that actually, where I asked them about the impressions that it left on them, their memories, what they remember, the emotions that it evoked, and also just let me just finish, and also 2 other elements. So, and also film conversations with Virgin Islanders, their perspectives on Danish tourists there, and archival material tracking the history of the evolution of the development of Danish tourism, because it has not always been here. It has a history.
So you're following it. I mean, so you what are they saying? I mean, what are you asking them? What are they telling you? I mean, or do we have to wait for the documentary to sort of get that part of it?
I think I would be hesitant to say, because I don't know because a story is another word for analysis, and an analysis is another word for a story, and I have not put it together. That will take many months, if not a year of editing.
Okay.
So I don't know what the story will be, but the only thing I can tell you is these core elements, and the structuring element will be the tour in itself, following this group as they encounter a place which at once is a place of vacation for them, but it's also a place where due to their citizenship, they both feel and they also have a special relation to the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Okay, so these are is this like a young crew, or is this an older set of folks?
It's older. I think the youngest was maybe in his late 30s. The group I followed, but the rest, I think the average age was maybe 65 or something.
Okay, and had any of them been here before?
Yes, 2 had been here before many years ago, and they also thought the islands had changed a lot, become especially St. Thomas had become more commercialized.
Okay,
that's what I remember they said.
Okay,
and then the travel guide has been here many times and even lived on St. Croix for some years.
Oh, okay.
The tour guide who went with them all the way from Copenhagen throughout the islands and back to Copenhagen.
Okay. That must be a hell of a job, boy. So how often do you think these tour guides come over here?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I would say the season in which Danish tourists they come to these islands are start in December. I would say maybe November, December, and end at late March or beginning of April after transfer day. And from there on, there are almost no Danish tourists here. I would say in general terms, and I would say that I know one tour guide at least. So I think she told me that she is here from. I think she will be here for some months from January to March.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you know any of these tourists prior?
No, not a single one. And what was very challenging about my experience was that, normally when you work with documentary film, and I'm also I study anthropology, so I'm very informed by anthropology too. And we most often we really, really know we want to connect with people before we begin to film them because it is a very special thing to film another human being, especially if you tell them, just act as if I'm not here. Just go on in your everyday life as if I'm not here. And I had begged and asked the travel agency if they could please let me meet the people before, and I would have facilitated a cake and coffee get together time before, and where we could get to meet each other and also talk about boundaries and what they could show me when not to film, and how I could make them as little uncomfortable as possible, pointing a camera at them during their vacation. But I did not get, the travel agency did not want me, I don't know why, they didn't want me to meet with them before. So, and I was not sure, maybe I thought it would be important to have them gathered for the first time in the airport, in Copenhagen airport. So I actually decided to film right away, which I should not have done. Now I think I've learned that you basically can't do that. It's too intimate. You have to do some small talk. You have to connect. Oh, you also live there. Oh, you've also done that. Oh, you also like David Bowie. You start to talk, right? But so that was a very challenging on a socio-emotional level, a very challenging start for me as a filmmaker, because as I got to know them, I was filming them walking around in the streets of Christiansted. The first day when we were here was a tour where we had to walk, or where they went through Christiansted walking, an historical tour, going down the boardwalk up to Fort Christiansværn, down King Street, and all the way to the cemetery, actually, and around the cemetery and back. A very long tour, it was very difficult for me, and the first day was terrible. Also, I filmed with my tripod. I have a big tripod, which is very heavy, and I have an aesthetic that I like to film that way, and it just didn't work. But the second day, then, I don't know what happened. Maybe it was because I forgot. I said to myself I should not use the tripod, and then it just started to work. I'm not sure, but anyways, it was very difficult because again, when you are on vacation, the whole, I think, what capitalism basically what it does in very broad terms is that it divides the social life of individuals, of groups, of societies into production and consumption. That's basic. And when you are a tourist, you have a way of encountering the world as a consumer. You can consume food, you can consume alcohol, you can consume landscapes, you can consume time, you can consume beaches, you consume all sorts of things, right? You are not a productive body that is there to produce anything. But you are there to consume the labor of others. I mean, tourism, as you know, because you are from St. Croix, it's hard labor to make these commodities available for tourists, right? It's a lot of labor. But I think what I'm trying to get at is that people don't think what I'm just thinking. People just think that they're on vacation and that it's not political. It's not they're just having a good time. So I think that's the kind of very strong narrative that tourism has. But I want to question that and say maybe, and this is for all of us, also not only in tourism, but when we think we are the least political, when we think we are the least relating to big themes as colonialism, racism, slavery, inequality, neoliberalism, whatever, maybe we are still relating to it. Is it possible? It's the same world, right? We're on the same planet, so maybe we're just relating to these themes in a different way, and maybe in a way where, for me as a filmmaker, I'm a filmmaker, I use my eyes, I use my ears. Maybe it can be a prism to actually get into talk about the really difficult things that make most people of all complexions extremely uncomfortable, talking about colonialism, talking about slavery, talking about racism and privileges, right? And I think tourism, for me, if I have to be honest, maybe I've started to become more interested in tourism in itself as a range of phenomena. But I must say that was not the core of it. The starting point of all this was for me to use it as a prism to explore how does Danes through tourism relate to the colonial legacy in the Caribbean.
Okay. Now, and I want to make sure I get the whole timeline correct. So this was your first visit that all this sort of happened, and so then you went back to Copenhagen, and you did your time, and now you're back again. And now, are you back by yourself, or are you with another group of people?
This time I am not here to hang out with the Danes. I'm here to hang out with the Crucians. I had actually thought that I was going to be 1 month on each major Virgin Island, but I could just feel that I wanted some depth, and so I ended up deciding to stay almost the entire 3 months, actually 13 weeks it will be, on St. Croix to get some depth. So that was one thing, being able to meet multiple times with people, getting a sense of a place. And of course, an island is an island. There's water around it, so it's not. It would have been different if it was 2 villages, 3 villages, 2-3 towns relatively close to each other where I could drive around. But so I decided to stay on St. Croix. That was the main reason. The other reason is I believe that, of course, all of the 3 islands were part of the Danish West Indies. But it seems to me, and we can discuss it, I think you know more about this than me. It seems to me, based on the conversations that I've had with people here, but also with Danes, that St. Croix is the place in which is the island of those 3 islands where the Danish colonial past is in multiple different ways plays the most significant role in the everyday lives of people. This is also about especially in terms of tourism. I have not been able to find any kind of tourism bureau on St. Thomas or St. John that really specifically deal with the colonial past, or where the colonial past really plays a significant role. To me, it seems, I want you to respond, but it seems to me that St. John and St. Thomas are more commercialized first and foremost, and also they are more it's not so much about the cultural tourism, it's more about the beach tourism. What do you think? Do you think it's true?
Well, St. Thomas is the capital of the Virgin Islands, and so I mean, I've been to St. Thomas 101 million times. So it is. Some people say it's like a New York type environment going on over there. I don't particularly see that, but in the 5-6 cruise ships go there, every other day. So there's a lot of people there. I've been there when these ships are there. The place is a madhouse. There's people everywhere. I'm sure even in those cruise ships, maybe there might be some people from Copenhagen coming here. But I would say that St. Thomas and St. John are probably a little bit more commercialized in a sense. It's the capital, so I guess they want to build it up. Whereas people that then you have St. Croix, the Big Island, and people come here and they say, "Oh, I love it here. It's bigger. It's a little bit more spread out." St. Thomas is kind of it's hilly. Houses are kind of on one another. It's kind of interesting how when you go there you see that it's just the way it is, very hilly. But St. Croix is spread out, and it's a little slower than St. John, than St. Thomas and St. John. I love them all. I don't get a sense of I don't know too. I haven't really been in tune with the whole Dane part of it and how that part fits into it. If you follow what I'm saying.
But I think for me, if I can add again, I don't want to impose anything. But what we do know, as I just said before, it was just how it seems to me. But of course, what we do know regarding the history of the three islands was, of course, that St. Croix was the place in which the majority of the sugar production took place, where the majority of the forced labor camps were placed.
Yes.
Whereas St. Thomas was a place for administration, for the political elite, and St. John, as I understand, was somewhere in between, maybe, or
yes, I would say that. I would say
that. So I think, and of course, this also plays a huge role in the different populations, and like both the history of these populations that are on each island, and I at least think that. I think what I really think, instead of comparing it, I will stop comparing these islands. But I because now I've been most in St. Croix, so maybe I feel more comfortable talking about that. What I do find very powerful, I can put it like that, on St. Croix, is that many people that I meet have a very deep knowledge of the history here, and many people are very proud of the different resistance and the different resistance movement, the different riots that took place against the state to which I belong to through my passport and my citizenship. And I think that is extremely powerful to encounter.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that's a fair assessment. St. Croix has always just been sort of, it's the Big Island. It's just more wide open. A lot of sugarcane was done here. A lot of back in the day, a lot of the farming. They say St. Croix was just sort of the breadbasket of farming and agriculture back in the day. I think agriculture, in a sense, needs to pick up here. I mean, I think we're a little behind in a sense. I mean, we should be growing more of everything. I mean, we got the land. I just don't know why we're not doing it. I know some patches of land are not good soil, but we need to be growing more. But like I said, St. Thomas, I don't know where they would grow in a sense. There probably is some limited growing there at I forget that name of that place up there, but not like in St. Croix. You know what I'm saying? St. Croix just got more space for that kind of stuff. The bulk of the government's over there in St. Thomas. There's some government here, but the bulk of it's there. I would imagine that the governor lives over there, so that's the capital. And like I said, when you get over there, you see the difference. The whole vibe just kind of changes to more of a big city. Like I said, some people say New York. I don't quite see New York, but it is the capital of the Virgin Islands. So, can you say who you've spoken to here?
Oh, I've spoken to so many people. I've spoken to hundreds of people while I've been here. So that would take too long. But
Okay.
what I can say is that I have especially focused on spending time with tourist workers here. I've been hanging out and filming with many of the island tour drivers. I've been, in an emancipation park in the morning, filming and exploring the ways in which they, in very fascinating and creative ways, fill up their buses with Puerto Rican or US or UK tourists. And I tried it myself, actually. The first day I went there, I was dropped off, and then I was really thinking, it's a weird job I have. I have to go over to strangers and ask if I can just kind of be around them and maybe even film them at a later point. But what was lucky was that I saw one of the tourist workers, one of the drivers whom I had met 2 years ago. So I went over to him and say, "Hey man, you remember me? You probably don't, because you meet thousands of tourists every year, and I look like just another gringo, So, but he remembered. He said, "You're the one with the camera," and I said, "That's exactly me." And then he was just a true comrade, introducing me to all of the drivers. And before I knew it, I was hired to get tourists on board, and there was Puerto Rican tourists coming in with this cruise ship. And I know a little Spanish, broken Spanish, but a little Spanish. So I started to yell, "Tour de Isla, bienvenidos a Santa Cruz," just basic framings. But I was very bad at it. It was very, very difficult. I did not have the seductive powers that that the drivers had. But what I could be used for, and why I think I have got access to many tours on island in general, is that I offered to send back a video after the tour that I've been on, and some photos. And there are still, maybe there's someone listening to right now or seeing, there are still someone I owe some photos and video. It will come. It's just because I've been on many tours, it will come. But I think so. That's just important for me to say. But I think this is something people want. They can use it for social media. They can use it for different things. So that is also that has been my way of giving something back. So in that sense, it feels like more collaborative, which I have enjoyed a lot.
Yeah. You always kind of throw me off when you say tourist workers. So when you say tourist worker, I think you're talking about talking to people or the staff of the Department of Tourism here, which we have. That's a whole entity within the government. But you're actually talking about taxi drivers.
It can be all sorts of. For me, it's. I think I just want to. The reason why I mean, we can talk about it, and all words have their pros and cons, right? But I think the reason why I use the term tourist worker is to acknowledge that service work in the 21st century is the ways in which the majority of the working class in the West work. It's not the factory work or things like that. And I think we should acknowledge that it is hard work. So I think that's why I use the word. But people here say that they work in hospitality. That's fine with me too. Yeah,
and then like I said, I say taxi driver, but I know what the context. And the whole thing of the customer service, is important. But what are these? Especially the taxi drivers? They pick up people from the airport, from the seaplane. Groups in town. Like, what is their thought about Denmark, and there's a history there between our countries. I mean, is it bad blood or is it good blood, or because there's always like a debate about that. The Danish, I don't want to say versus the the Virgin Islands, but because you guys own us at one point, there is some I don't know, some tension. We want more questions answered. We want to see things done a little bit more quicker. That kind of thing. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So the question is what I in general terms have.
I mean,
can you ask the question again?
Yeah, what are the taxi drivers like when what are they saying? I mean, what do they say? Because they say the taxi drivers have a very important job here. As soon as someone comes here from out of the area, they're the tourists. These are the first persons that they see as a taxi driver, and there's some question at times too. Are they telling the history correctly? Everybody has their view of how things are, and they have an opinion, a perspective. It's your perspective. of the versions of St. Croix, of St. Thomas, of St. John. I mean, we have taxi drivers here, but when you go to St. Thomas, I mean, there's hundreds of taxi drivers over there, just because the ships are there and there's people that want to be taken around. And so, customer service is important, but it is hard work. But what are they saying to you? I mean, is it anything that anyone in particular says to you? Oh, I mean, what are they saying?
So I think first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that it's not a homogeneous group. It's people working here as taxi drivers and as tour guides. Of course, I would also say that there are those taxi drivers who mainly or only drive the taxis. And then there are those who also do tours. And some people I know, it's just so they like to tell stories about the place. So they just do it naturally. So I think so I just think that there are those two groups within the group, those who only drive the taxi and those who do tours and taxi driving, right? The second thing I want to say again is that it's not a homogeneous group. It's a very diverse group. They have very different ethnic backgrounds. I think what I have noticed is that in general terms, it is not people who are born and raised on St. Croix who have the job as taxi drivers. It's people who have migrated to the islands, either from the Down Islands, some of the other Antilles, or it could be from Dominica, it could be from Martinique, it could be from other Caribbean islands. But again, I think these islands are very, very different. They have very different histories, different languages. And the drivers, so I think that's also important to acknowledge. But I think, again, what is interesting about it is that I have not yet, and I've met many, I haven't met a single person who's driving the cab who was born in St. Croix. I'm sure they exist, but I haven't met them yet. And I think, and then I have talked to some Crucian people, or people, I'm not the one to say who's Crucian or not Crucian, but people who are born and raised here and who maybe also have generations back. And I tell them that what I'm gonna tell you, that many of the drivers that I meet, they really like the Danish tourists. That's what they tell me. They think that they are very polite, and of course they don't tip. That's what all Virgin Islanders hate about the Danes.
They don't tip.
But they don't tip. That we don't have a culture of tipping. So it's not it's really. I think it's a European thing, but especially in Denmark, we don't know how to tip. We've never.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
We would only tip if you have to. I don't know what you have to do. You have to do something very extraordinary as a service worker to get any tip. So no. So when many of the drivers say that the Danes are cheap, but which is I can feel the cheapness in me myself. I have to fight my own inner Danish cheapness every single day while I'm here on St. Croix, not to be just another cheap Dane, because deep down I'm also just a cheap Dane. So I completely understand, because we're not brought up with it. But I think the what I want to say is that it's really interesting for me that I have that the drivers in general terms, they really prefer the Danish tourists to US tourists. They many of them have told me that they find some of the US tourists more rude, more colonial actually in the way they are. That they just walk around in town without shirt, without, like, as if the whole island is one big beach only made for them to have their leisure time. That they in general terms, the drivers, again, we're talking in general terms, I'm not talking about a specific individual, but in general terms, I would say that what they have told me also is that they experience more direct racism. And racism is many things. For me, racism is a systemic, oppressive structural thing. But when they say that the US tourists in general terms are more racist, what they mean with it, I'm quite sure, is that is using derogatory language directly, not having a body language which obviously expresses some kind of white supremacy. So this is what they tell me. And then, of course, I ask them, because I say, listen, this is an independent film, and I'm not going to publish any of this material without your consent. This is how I always work. I'm going to show you everything in which you appear. So this means that you can talk freely. You can trash talk the Danish state and the Danes and the Danish tourists to me. You can trash talk me. I'm here. I'm open. I don't work for my government. I work against my government. You can do whatever you want. This is a safe space. Do whatever. But they're really like, no. But I am sincere with you. It's not just so. And I respect, and I respect that, and that's what they tell me. So I think it's true. At the same time, I want to say something which is an unconditional truth, and that is, of course, when you work, and again, I will use the word tourist worker. When you work as a tourist worker, your bread and butter, and paying the bills depends on tourism, and depends therefore logically on tourists that want to come. And therefore, your freedom of speech is limited. Of course, that's it. They cannot speak as freely as maybe you can, or I can, or some intellectuals on St. Croix can, or people who just don't work in the tourism industry. Yeah. So I have also tried to talk with people who have had experiences with working in the tourism industry, but who doesn't. And in general terms, they are much more critical towards the Danish tourists, and are much more, I would say, not hostile, but I would say they are much more skeptical. Why would you? The question I get over and over again is why do Danes want to go on vacation in a place where crimes against humanity of unspoken brutality were committed in the name of Denmark and the Danish state?
Good question.
I say that question is why I'm doing the film. I don't want to answer the question. I want to explore that question. That's why I'm making this film.
Yeah. So let's sort of divvy up. So you seem like a young dude. I mean, I don't know how old you are. Like maybe your 30s. How did you get into filmmaking, and why did you choose this topic? I mean, you could have chose 101 other topics, but this topic. Talk a little bit about your upbringing. I mean, are you Democrat? Are you Republican? Are you independent? Catholic, Jewish? Non-denominational? Let's get a little bit into that side of you.
So I would say I wake up in the morning as an anarchist, and I go to bed at night as a Marxist.
Okay.
That was my political thing. I don't know. So I think. What can I say about myself? I started to make films because I was not good enough with soccer. I wanted to be a football player, but I was not good enough, so I had to start doing something else. And then I started to make films, and that's good too.
Okay.
And why I'm making this film specifically, the way it started was that I met a high school teacher of mine, a wonderful character, a tall, pale man who had just retired, and I met him, and we started to talk. We randomly bumped into each other in the streets, and he told me that he had just been to what he described as the Danish West Indies, and I had never been to the U.S. Virgin Islands. I didn't know much about it, but what happened was that I imagined him standing on a beach under some palms with some blue water in the background, and he was rubbing very white many layers of sunscreen into him with the Danish flag in the background. Like, it was completely based on my imaginings. I didn't know anything. But what I did know was that I could feel I wanted to see him there. I wanted to see him on that vacation. So I started, and I knew that it was a thing. I knew it was a phenomenon that the the Danish tourists went there, and then I just started to work on it.
Did in your education, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, high school, did they teach you guys about the Virgin Islands? Did they give you any history on the Virgin Islands at all?
I cannot remember having had any educational. I cannot remember in my school or my high school having had any lessons on Danish colonialism in the Caribbean. I'm almost sure I have had it, but it did not make any impression.
But
And if we did have it, it must have been a very brief thing. I at least I cannot remember.
But now in 2025, is that something that they teach in school there?
Things have started. I want to say that I need to know more about it. I'm hesitant to. I'm not completely sure. I would like to know more about it. I would say in general terms that things have started to change, and you cannot make, at least not as openly, the same myths that you could make 20 years ago or even 15 years ago. You cannot say, or at least it depends on which spaces are we in. I mean, are we in intellectual circles? Are we on the countryside in Denmark? Are we among the working class? Are we among, I mean, it depends on where we are. Now you ask about school, and I would say you could not print a school book today where you, or at least I don't think so, where you could openly state, for instance, that it was Peter von Scholten who gave the slaves their freedom. I think you would at least have to problematize and say, or as some people say, the Virgin Islanders took their freedom, the enslaved took their freedom. I would think you would at least have to problematize, but I'm not completely sure. But I would say, and why do I say this? Why do I think that it's going in that direction? That is based on some articles that I've read by a Danish historian who argues this. A historian I really respect. There are many Danish historians I have no respect for, but I really respect her. She's really good. Called Astrid Andersen Nonbo. I can really recommend her books. She is really a good historian, and she says that things are moving on an educational level in a better direction. You cannot, I mean, you could basically still use the N-word in the 90s, right? So it doesn't say a lot that there has been progress because the conditions and the levels of education have been so poor. But I would say that on the one hand. On the other hand, I will say the knowledge is minimal in the population. People don't know about. Let me give you an example. I would not even think that we're 1% of the Danish population who knows what the fire burn was. I seriously don't think so. Just say 2 words about the fire burn. What one word? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay. Interesting.
Who really knows something about the historical conditions that happened? What they could know, what more people know for sure, is what I would say maybe 10 or 20% of the Danish population. Those who are a bit more, who are in a higher education, have a higher educational background, or who are part of some kind of we could say educated upper middle class, whatever, in Copenhagen, in Aarhus, in some of the areas in which the educational centers are. Those people for sure know about Lavon Bells and Jeanette Ehlers' I Am Queen Mary. They for sure know about that, the big monument that was created and put up in Copenhagen. And as I understand, they're working on it to get it up now. But for sure they would know about the monument, but really to know that it was really, I don't think so. But maybe I'm too pessimistic. I don't know. But I don't think so. I think there's a long way to go still. And I've only started to know about these things because it's my full-time work to work on this film.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, Adam. So when you came the first time with this tourist group, were they coming because they were interested in getting some questions answered about the whole Denmark, Virgin Islands situation, that they owned us? And I guess this is a group of people that I just wanted to see what Denmark owned. I mean, does that make sense to you? Or were they, because I mean, these people could have gone to Miami for vacation, but they're coming here. Do you think did they have any, when they were buying the package, were they sort of given any history about, what the Virgin Islands is and what our role was and this kind of stuff?
I would like to say first and foremost that the group was actually class-wise more diverse than I had thought. There were people from the Danish working class going on this trip, and there were people from the upper class and everything in between. So that's just to say that it was, even though all were white, most were in monogamous relationships. They were coming in pairs. There was so they were ethnically, in that sense, very, very alike, but
Mhm.
I would say that they were class-wise, there was a variety, and also in terms of education, there were a few of them who were academics, and they had read books about these places. Those from the working class had not, and that of course shapes the way in which you encounter the space. And those who were academics, they had prepared and read and this and that. But I think it's just, why am I saying this? I'm just again trying not to say that everyone is the same, to make a homogeneous description of these people.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I would say that everyone I did conversation with them, of course, during the tour, but especially after. And one of the questions that I asked all of them was, would you have chosen to go to these 3 islands if they had not been colonized by Denmark? And the
Mhm.
answer was immediately with every single one, no.
Okay.
The reason why they are going to these islands are, and I can say that with 100%, I'm 100% sure about that, is the colonial history of
Mhm. Between.
of these islands, for sure. Because as they said, if we just wanted to go to the beach or something, we could have chosen anything in the Caribbean. And you also have to we also have to remember that in a Danish context, it's so much. If you really just want to go on a beach vacation and get drunk or just lie at the pool for 2 weeks, then you go to Mallorca, you go to Spain, or you go to Greece, or you go to Bulgaria. It would maybe be 1/5 of the price that it is, so it just wouldn't make any sense on an economic scale. So I'm yeah, that is for sure. The tourists come here because of the colonial history.
Okay. Perfect. Our guest tonight is Adam Pushka. He's making a film. He's documenting his he was here earlier back in 2022
23.
and 23, and with a group of tourists from Denmark, and now he's back more focusing his conversations with the local people of the Virgin Islands. And he's planning to go to St. Thomas and St. John, interact with those people. Have you met any people that live here that are from St. Thomas?
No.
No. What about St. John?
No.
No. So just mostly Crucian people. I love my Crucian people, man. Well, I hope that when you go over to St. Thomas, you get a good welcome. It's just a shame that when you do these documentaries, it takes so much time before it actually comes out. Because I'm eager to see it myself, but I gotta wait, I guess, a year.
Yes, I think if everything will go right, the film will be done in 2027, and more likely will be done in 2028. So it takes a lot, and I've worked on it since 2022. It takes a lot of time to make films.
Okay, you doing the edit yourself?
Yeah, no. I'm gonna work with some people for the first time. It's my first film where I work with others, where I work with more people. Otherwise, I've done everything myself. So I work with a producer too, and so it's a different kind of film that I'm doing. It's my first long film. It's my first feature-length documentary. Normally, the short films that I've made before, I've spent 1 year, 2 years. From beginning to end. So this is a different
so even
thing.
a short film takes 2 years.
Oh yeah. It does. It really does. It depends on. I mean, if it has to be, if you really want to give all the details attention, which I think you should do as an artist. Well, then of course I can. The problem, I think, documentary is such a tricky word. I struggle with it every morning. I wake up in the morning and I want to throw it out the window, and when I go to bed, I want to defend it against its critics. So I think there is a spectrum of people and what they think about the documentaries. There are those on the one side of the spectrum who believe that it should be discarded. We should just forget about the word because it reduces the act of making non-fiction films to an act of simply just pressing record and documenting, almost like taking a picture of a newspaper, right? So, and on the other side of the spectrum, there are those people who defend it because they believe that it is important that we stick to some kind of objective reality. This is not to say that, of course, if you were making a film about the Danish tourists, even though you were in the exact same spots as me, it will still be a different film because you and I have different sensibilities, different ethnic backgrounds, different we're different people, right? So it's not to say in some kind of positivist sense that I believe in objectivity, but I think these people, what they argue for is that don't we take what is so powerful about non-fiction films, about documentaries, don't we kind of make it more lame and less powerful if we cannot say this is actually what for instance the drivers believe about the Danish tourists. It's not just something that some pale weird obsessive young Dane have told them to think about because he wants them to think this about the Danish tourists, but that there is some reality about it. And I place myself again, I think it's very context based what I think about it myself, but because I don't make, I'm not a journalist. It's not just, I think of what I do as a creative act. And at the same time, the people I work with have a lot of agency. It's what they want to show me. It's it's where they want me to go. It's and of course I can direct some things. I can say, can you sit a bit more like that and turn your head like this, and we can change the light a bit, and be a bit, and I can say, and I can, if I want them to look at me in a specific way, I can try to, if I want them to be aggressive, I can say something that provokes them, think about that, and then answer whatever you feel like with your eyes into the camera. Or I can say something which makes them feel very nice, and they will have a different smile. So of course I can direct, but there is a limit, I believe, to the way. I think it would be devastating, for instance, if what we're doing right now is part of the documentary, and what I just said about the drivers and what they actually think about the tourists was just complete fantasy. It had got nothing to do with the actual everyday reality of these people. I think that would be devastating, because right now you and I and the people who are maybe listening here, they have we have a social contract that when I talk about what the drivers say and think and do, and the other tourist workers, what they think and how they relate to the Danish tourists, it's not just something that I'm making up.
Well, that's their everyday life. I mean, they're living this every day, and so no, it's just interesting to get a perspective, just like, if I were to do a documentary on what you're doing, the same topic, it would probably just be totally different.
Completely. And that's also the joy of it. That's also the wonder of it. And I think the only way to reach objectivity is by acknowledging your own position. There's no other way. I know that my complexion and that my ethnic background and everything, of course it shapes, and my sensibilities, my upbringing, it all shapes the ways in which I frame what I find, what pulls me as a human being. David, I was thinking if I could ask you a question.
Sure.
Do you think I look like a tourist, a Danish tourist?
I would probably say yes, in a sense. I mean, you stand out. I mean, you're like 7 feet tall, so yeah. I mean, I would say so. I mean, if I saw you walking in town, I would probably think, you're not from here. Now, whether I would say, I mean, you look white, like Caucasian white, so maybe you're from the States. But until I hear you talk, I say, okay, this guy is from Denmark. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess after a while, you would sort of blend in, with the whole culture here.
You think that would be possible for me?
Yeah, be yourself. People will accept you. I mean, that's I guess the right way to go about it. You don't want nobody hating on you.
No, sure not. Yeah.
You're respectful. You give respect, and and you get respect. It's how life goes. You disrespect somebody, they're upset, they're angry, they want to hurt you, they want to harm you. I mean, show respect, get respect. Vice versa. I definitely agree with that. One of the things that you've said a couple of times in this interview so far, and I'm quote me if I'm wrong here, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you say work against my government. Is that something that you have said?
Yes, I think I've said it once.
Okay. So when you say that, what do you mean specifically? You're working against my government. What your government as in over there in Denmark? And you're working against, what do you mean? I mean, are you, are you a radical? Or, I mean, what do you mean you're working against?
I don't know if I'm a radical. I think I'm a humanist, and I think being a humanist in these times is unfortunately an act of radicalism. I would say that being a humanist should be the moderate way to believe in the fine declarations of human rights and these things. But that is turning more and more in this world, which across the world is turning more and more fascist and autocratic. It is becoming a radical position, but I don't think of myself as radical, just as people who are deemed in the margins or in the periphery. They don't feel that they are in the periphery of the world. They feel that they are at the center of the world. Some people would say that St. Croix is in the periphery of the world. I'm sure that no Crucians feel that way, so it depends on from where you see it. I don't think I'm a radical, but it's true. But I think the reason why I say I work against my government, I try to work against my government, is because of its racist policies. And this is not just about not acknowledging, I think, in economic terms, in real political responsibility, what I think the Danish state owes the people of the U.S. Virgin Islands. I'm talking about the horrible treatment of refugees that we've had for the last 40 years in Denmark. I'm talking about the many war crimes that the Danish state has committed in the Balkan region, especially in Afghanistan and Iraq too. How now we are sending weapons, we're sending parts of the weaponry to Israel, killing innocent children. So I think if these positions of mine are radical, well, I'm a radical, but I have no problem with that.
Okay. I mean, what you said makes sense. I just wanted you to sort of just add a little more context to it. So you're probably just like a lot of other people. You have concerns about the way the government's doing things, what they're doing, and you wish it wouldn't be that way. And I guess if if your voice and maybe 10 other voices like you could maybe change the way things are. That would, and I get it for sure, man. I guess you and I feel the same way you feel on that point there. Let me ask you another question. I think over my years back, so I came back to St. Croix in 2008. One of the things that, if I remember correctly here, just listening to some of the local talk shows, which I don't listen to much anymore, hardly, but it was a time where every morning when I'm driving to work, I'd be listening, flipping from one station to the other. But this whole thing of because of Denmark's history with the Virgin Islands, some people feel in a sense that there should be more talks about like a reparation that Denmark would give Virgin Islanders something for the struggles that we've been through with Denmark. In the States, we call it reparation. I don't know what between us and Denmark, what they call that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think that, I mean, is that even being discussed over there in political terms? Are you aware of, or what's your personal take on that? Do you think that the Denmark government should give every Virgin Islander, I don't know, $500,000 and just call it George? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think I will answer your question, but I think I have to go a way around. I think this question is also a question of decolonization. And what does decolonization mean? What does it entail? And what kind of action, what kind of ability to responsibility does it place on the either former or ongoing colonizing state? Denmark is still an ongoing colonial power. I think we should remember that in Greenland. So what I want to say is that it is question. What I think you're also asking me is what do I think decolonization mean? And I think in the terms of the relation between the U.S. Virgin Islands and Denmark, it's about concrete things such as material transfer and money. I think we have to talk about that. I would feel uncomfortable being the one to say technically and saying it's this kind of amount. I think I do not have the knowledge, and I think it should be a democratic conversation where especially the Virgin Islanders who were seen as commodities, as objects when the so-called transfer happened, where they were not asked. Of course, the people here should have a very, very central, if not the most central place, a significant place around the table in these discussions. There's no doubt about it. So I don't think it's up to me. I would like to be part of facilitating that discussion, but I don't think it can be me who says the amount. I think that has to be a democratic discussion about what the people here think is just. Then,
I wasn't really saying you per se, but I'm just using a number, just a number.
But I think that's impossible. I simply don't. I'm not an economist. I don't know how to do that. I would, but what I can say, as again a humanist, as a person who comes from the humanities more and social science, I believe what would be the first step, because we have had the discussions, we have had the conversation, we don't need to talk about it more. I think what should be was that it was facilitated democratically, and that people of the Virgin Islands and people of Denmark, of course, somehow could meet in, I don't know if it should be an election, what it should be, I don't know, but I think that there should be a democratic process, because there has never been a democratic process about this. I mean, the transfer was not democratic. Yes, the Danes voted, but that's not, of course, it's only the colonizing part that votes. I mean, it's an act of insanity, you know, and it's undemocratic by its nature. So I think first and foremost, I think it's on time that some of the Western countries, they don't just talk about democracy, but that they actually do democracy. I think that would be very, very timely in 2025. So that's the first thing I want to say, but also about decolonization. I think decolonization, and where I'm much stronger, because what can I do? I'm not like my brain crashes when I look at the statistics, or I fall asleep. I'm not. It's just not something that is in my nature. You know, I have friends who are very good at that, and I'm very, very happy that they do it, so I don't have to do it to work with numbers. You know, and I'm sure you are also happy that I'm not working with any of your numbers, because it wouldn't go well. You know, but what I maybe know something about is the politics of images, politics of sound, and what I would really like to see, and what I think we also need to push through, is a decolonization of our culture. And I'm not separating the economy from the culture. You cannot do that. Capitalism, for instance, it's both an economic and a cultural system. You cannot separate it. But now I'm doing it just for the sake of being able to talk about it. And I think what I would like to see are, for instance, I think it would be great if the Danish Film Institute would facilitate that some young, or maybe not even young, but just some Virgin Islanders who make films, because there are some very good filmmakers on these islands, that they would go to Denmark and study the Danes, make films about the Danes. I would love that. That would be an act of decolonization, and an act of real curiosity about your perspectives. You know, I think that would be good. I'm trying to decolonize myself. You know, I've been brought up. I'm a white male from Denmark. I've been socialized to think and act like a colonialist. I have to strip off all of that, excuse my French, bullshit, you know? And I do it every day, but I'm not, it's a process, and we are all, no matter where we come from, we have been socialized in a world which is neo-colonial. So I think the way is not to go and say, oh, you do this and you think like, but I think what we should do is first and foremost acknowledge where are we, and then discuss where do we want to go, and then we can track from the future we want to construct, how do we get there. And to answer your question very, very clearly, there is no doubt about that it's also an economic question, and it's about land, it's about sovereignty, it's about the rights of your people. And we live in a world where money does not rule everything, but it rules a lot. So of course the Danish state has to pay back, not only for the profits that were generated, but just to show some kind of remorse for the atrocities that were the unspeakable. Mike, if you start to really, I'm sure you know this too, if you really start to read about what was done by the Danish state in these islands, I mean, I think we should treat it with the same kind of seriousness that Europeans treat Holocaust with.
Yeah,
it's not a hierarchy. It's not saying something was but I think that would also be a huge improvement of the culture, not just in Denmark but in Europe, that people started to treat the transatlantic slave trade and everything that and all of the violence that it produced, all of the racism, all of the complexities, all of the dilemmas and the violence that we deal with today, with the same kind of deep sympathy, of deep remorse, and deep respect for the people who have survived it and who are the ancestors of the survivors. That would be an amazing improvement culturally.
Yes. All right, Adam, on that note, man, we got to leave it there. That was it was important. Well said. I agree. You know, a lot of what you're saying does make sense. We got to start somewhere. And like I said, this was a topic that's been talked about on the radio stations in the morning talk shows, but I don't listen to that anymore, so I don't know if they still are. But some people feel, yes, they need to write us a check, write everybody a check, or give us some land, or give us 25 cars or something, for what has happened here. But Adam, thank you so much, man. You been a great guest tonight, man. I appreciate you. It was nice meeting you once again. And you got me thinking here about, when you say you're here, I was sending a film crew over to Denmark. One of my good friends, Ramon, he's a movie producer here. I'd like to introduce you guys together. Maybe he can get a crew to go over there. And he does a lot of local stuff. I'll send you his YouTube page, so you can see some of the stuff that he's doing. He's not doing documentaries. He's more doing, I guess, I would say, like short films. Talking to people about this, that, and the other. Did anybody talk to you about horse racing here?
Nope.
No?
Oh, you're talking about the young guys who go to the beach and ride their horses? Is that thing,
we have a racetrack here. We have a racetrack.
Nope. Please tell me about it.
Well, we have a racetrack on the south side. It's something that's been there since I was growing up here, but it's been closed for the last several years. It just kind of seems to be caught up in sort of the cloud of the government and private industry and who's going to do what and pay for what, and who gets this amount of percentage and that amount of percentage. So the track is in limbo right now. It's on the side, right across from the airport. If you go to the airport, you'll see it. It probably doesn't look like a track, but it's there. The whole structure is there. They even took down the stadium. If I'm not, the actual seating, we had like a whole bleacher thing there, and they took that down. I don't even know if they put up another one yet. But I ask, when you're walking around, ask anybody about what their thoughts on the racetrack is. It's something it's been a cultural thing for the Virgin Islands here, in particular St. Croix, for hundreds of years. Horse racing. Even when I came back in 2008, they were having live horse races there, and then it just kind of went into limbo, and it's been in limbo ever since. But Adam, thanks again for coming on the show tonight. I really appreciate that. I know you probably got more to say, but time is ticking on us here. But we'll have you back maybe when you get back up to Denmark. And I only got one request for you, Adam. Try to get this thing done in 2 years instead of 5.
I'm sure my girlfriend would like that too.
Get it done in 2 years instead of 5, man.
She's so tired of me talking about the Queens and Peter von Scholl. I'm just like living in the 19th century. So I think she also wants me to return to the 21st century.
Yeah, it's funny because Johanna, she just did a documentary herself. I don't know if you're aware of that. She just did a documentary about the connection between the Virgin Islands and St. Croix and Vieques.
Oh, but that's some years ago.
Well,
right? She did a new one.
Well, I guess it's a new one. She just did a whole a showing of the video maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And she was on our show talking about it. But the moral of my story is that she was saying that it took her some 5-6 years to do that documentary. And I think it was only like 40-45 minutes. So yours is going to be, because it's 5 years long, it's going to be about 5 hours long. 5 years.
Oh, it's
5 years.
80 minutes maybe.
Okay. All right, Adam. I appreciate that, man.
I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to be in this space with you, for your questions, for your work. And I want to thank all the people of St. Croix who are listening, but also just all the wonderful people who have met me, who have been generous with me. All of the things that I could say about what people here on the island, I am totally accountable with everything I said in my own name, but but everything I know about how it is to live on this island, well, that's because people have been generous with me, wanting to talk to me, and people have been very, very, in general terms, very, very friendly and very open, and I'm just extremely grateful for that. And I am also hopeful that despite the different privileges we have, despite the different positions we have, the different ethnic backgrounds, class backgrounds, that it is worth trying to meet and connect despite all of that. So thank you, St. Croix.
All right, well said. And as I mentioned to you, I'm going to be sharing this into some Facebook groups, and a lot of these groups, a fair amount of them are from St. Thomas, so they might be seeing this video of us, you know, and you saying you're on your next stop is St. Thomas, your next stop is St. John. So if you see Adam on the street, be sure to hail him up, let him know who you are, and be a part of his documentary.
And if you have, if you want to talk to me about your experience with Danish tourists, your perspective, maybe you have some archives, old photographs of when the Danish tourists started to come here, please feel free to reach out to me. Maybe, David, I can send you my email, or you can share my email in a post, and they are more than welcome to contact me. I can
yeah, say it now. Say your email just a couple times now.
Okay, so my email is Adam, just with ADAM, and then it's Paaske, PAASKE, and then it's at me.com.
Me as in me.com.
Yeah. Yes,
like
me as in Mike, as Nate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like yahoo.com, it's me.com. Me.com.
Adam Paaske at me.com. Please hit me up. I'm gonna be here for 10 days more, and I would love to hear your perspectives, because it's your perspective.
All right, man. Well said. Thank you so much. On that note, we're out. I just want to say real quick that this is the It's Your Perspective talk show every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 p.m. until. But most importantly, we are on the road to 500 shows. We just finished episode 497, 498, and 499 are in the books next week. Soup and I, and Adam, I keep saying Soup. That's the guy I do the show with. He's not on tonight, but we're having a big show on our 500 show. So we want to thank all our viewers, all our guests, all our watchers, people that subscribe to our channels, people that have liked our videos. Thank you all so much for just hanging in there with us. On that note, we're out. Everybody have a great evening. Thank you.
Ciao.